I think when you force these NWSL refs, I'm not saying it's right, but when you force NWSL refs in these 50-50 calls, they're not always going to go your way. Hello, everybody. This is today's edition of The Late Sub. I am your host, Claire Watkins. It is Monday, November 25th, and we are going to do a deep dive into NWSL Championship weekend, the ins, the outs, the off the field, the on the field, what happened before, during, and after the game. There's so much to dig into. I'm just not even going to do even more of an intro. We got to go. We got to talk soccer. Let's dig in. NWSL Championship weekend. We got to talk about it. We're going to talk about it in full, in detail. We're going to talk about the beginnings, the durings, the afters, the impressions, the previews, the things happening on the field, the things happening off of the field. I love NWSL Championship weekend. It is the focal point of the year in women's soccer in the United States. It is the summit of the business side of women's soccer in the United States, which that part's growing, and that's very exciting. People keep referring to it as the Super Bowl. You know, it's the Super Bowl of women's soccer, and every single year that becomes more and more true, not even just because of the importance of the game and the way that the players do such a good job of being ambassadors for the league and ambassadors for the game, but also the way that everyone comes into town. Kansas City was an excellent host. Their love of women's soccer was obvious, beginning, middle, and ending of the whole weekend, from talking to, baristas, Uber drivers, just people who come to the live shows, people who came to the game, came to FanFest. It's so obvious just what lovely organic support there is for women's soccer in the city of Kansas City, and they were just incredible hosts. I love Kansas City. It's a wonderful place. I just, every single place we went, I had so much fun, and it felt easy and manageable. And that is also important because here at JWS Championship Weekend, we are running around. If you saw us in 6 different locations, you were not alone, because we do a lot. And I just want to talk about maybe that briefly just before we jump into the game. We're going to do some good analysis on the game. But a couple years ago, NWSL Championship Weekend, let's even just talk about emerging outside of the lost pandemic year. So there was no Championship Weekend in 2020. So let's even just talk about the last, couple of years of Championship Weekends. And it's been really wonderful to see the off the field stuff grow so much. I was noting this weekend so many times that we had the whole weekend had 5, 6 different live podcast tapings, many of which were hosted by legends of the game, right? Like we at JWS had the Fast Friends live show with Kelly and Lisa. Men in Blazers had it with Sam Mewis. You had Together had one with Pino and Sue Bird. I think there were a variety of other ones happening as well. To see so much programming that people could go to, that even if you didn't necessarily have a ticket to the game, you could go be part of it. Or if you were traveling to see the game, you could turn it into a multi-day event and get to meet people. And even FanFest, how many players were there signing autographs, and the supporters events on Friday night. All of that is new. It's emerging. I think it feels a little bit like the Wild Wild West, even on our side, where we're kind of creating things that we've never seen before. And that can be kind of scary. And there's a little bit of tension to that. But also, I think it's just so exciting to see not only how the space has grown, but what that means for fans of the game, or what it means to come to Championship Weekend as a fan, or even what it means to come to Championship game as a player. I was noting this weekend a lot that when you speak to players, which we do fairly regularly, you see their personalities, you see how smart and funny they are, and how, lovable they are, and how fans going to get to know them better. And it took some time though for them to get a little bit more comfortable showcasing that, maybe off the field, right? Or showcasing it on a stage, right? You put stage lights on you and you speak into a microphone, and every single year the players get more comfortable. And I feel like we see their personalities come out more and more every single year. And it just makes me very happy to be in this space and to be facilitating some of that. And you're just seeing what has always been there, but you're always seeing just larger platforms for others to see it. And so I always just have a fabulous time at Championship Weekend. And I felt like from the really big things, even when it comes to big brands, the really small things like hanging out at an arcade bar with some friends, it all just went so smoothly. I had a blast. So I wanted to start with that. I always leave Championship Weekend with my heart feeling very full. And this weekend was no different. I want to briefly shout out just kind of what we did at JWS this weekend, because I'm constantly in awe of my coworkers, and I hope anyone who got to engage with any of this stuff had a good time. Like I said, the Fast Friends live show was a blast. Lisa Leslie should be a stand-up comedian in addition to a WNBA all-star and licensed real estate agent and media mogul and motivational speaker. She should be a stand-up comedian because she's one of the funniest people I've ever met. The JWS party on Friday night was as good as ever at Jay Rieger. It's just really, really nice to see, especially kind of players have a chance to cut loose And I was noting how some of the OGs who are recently retired, now they don't have to like have in the back of their head that they have to be like in playing shape, right? So you see like Pino and Sue and Kelly and Merritt Mathias and Ali Krieger, they're all cutting it up on the dance floor. Desi Scott, these players who are kind of newly freed from worrying about maybe what the next day looks like. So that was so fun to see. I thought the activation that we did at FanFest was awesome. We collaborated with Pitchside Coffee, which people might know is a coffee company that got started by some Kansas City Current players. Desi Scott out there moving merch. You had people, you had Kristen Hamilton making lattes. It was really fun. And I think a coffee activation, coffee is a very popular thing at championship weekend. I thought that went so well. And I thought it was so cool how Kansas City fans came out to engage with their favorite players, even though those players weren't in the championship game. So all of that stuff, beautiful. And I always want to note that stuff because that's what makes championship weekends special, even just outside of what happens during the game. Because as we know, the game championship games can be kind of cagey, and this one was no different. And you never know exactly what you're going to get in that full 90 of regulation. So all of that other stuff really boosts it and makes you feel like part of a women's soccer community in addition to people who are there to see a game. And so with all of that, I want to maybe dive into the pre-championship stuff a little bit. So we get into town on Wednesday, media day is on Thursday, press conferences on Friday. You get to know the players kind of where they're at in this moment, the players who are playing in this game, whether they're the Washington Spirit or the Orlando Pride. You get to talk to them a little bit, kind of get a sense of where their head is at. Very nice to be in a room with them. We live in a universe with a lot of Zoom calls and a lot of phone calls. Really nice to actually be there to speak to them eye to eye and get a sense of how they're feeling. And I've been to the championship game every single year since 2018. And I have found that process as media is always really illuminating because you start to see the through lines of maybe what you're going to see during the game. Championship games, I wish I could say they were surprising. They rarely are, or at least the ones that I've been to. Sometimes you get a sense of kind of what's going on. You see the different ways a game can go. But if there's a prevailing theme, if there's a prevailing narrative, those tend to win out. And I actually wrote off memory, I was writing down kind of like some of the impressions that I've gotten in past years. Like 2018, that was Portland versus North Carolina, right? Portland was really loose. I remember they were like playing knockout in the basketball gym at Nike headquarters in Portland. But North Carolina was like all business. They were very, very serious, very businesslike. And then North Carolina runs all over them in that championship game. And so you were looking at a team that's maybe a little bit happy to be there. They're really loose. They're having fun. Or the team that is all business. The all business team kind of takes the trophy there. 2019. Championship experience, and there were some major coaching mistakes on the Chicago side, and you could see those in the injuries that Chicago was dealing with. I remember media day in 2019 finding out that Tierna Davidson was injured and wasn't going to play in that game, and just thinking like, oh, this is a tide shift, right? North Carolina absolutely overruns Chicago. Not close, but another one where experience and kind of being businesslike and being very focused and not losing your head a little bit with the excitement was very important for the winning team. 2021 was two teams with going through a lot off the field. That was Washington and Chicago. As we know, 2021 was an incredibly tumultuous year for the NWSL. Again, I am still struck now in retrospect just how much of a recovery year it was on the business side coming out of the lockdown of the pandemic. And obviously there were the scandals, and for Chicago, that team, they had more to come. And I think they kind of could sense that. And it was very tense, but also there was so much joy and freedom in between the lines. You could see that this was a solace for a lot of players. And I think you saw that from both teams. And Washington wins in a very close game between two teams that maybe it was surprising that they were there in the first place. 2022, Portland is back in the championship game. Sophia Smith is emergent. You can sense it. She wins MVP that Thursday before the championship game, and you see Kansas City come in and they look a little bit wide-eyed, they look a little bit nervous, they look a little bit like the underdog, and that's how that game plays out. Portland wins that game. 2023, it was the old heads holding court, right? You had Megan Rapinoe versus Ali Krieger. You talk about surprises. That's the one for me that was the most surprising. I don't think that obviously anyone saw that Rapinoe injury coming at the beginning of that game. That did throw that game on its head between two very even teams. But Gotham was actually, I think, a little bit more resilient and able to kind of have those explosive moments that maybe were even surprising. You get Gotham with the win there. And then this year, you don't know exactly. You have some ideas, you sketch them out, you think about what you're going to see. And my main takeaways Thursday this week was that Washington is incredibly well coached, very organized. They have some key point leaders and veterans, but they're very young. This is a team that made it to this point off of rookies stepping up. And again, that always speaks to good coaching. That always speaks to clear coaching communication. And the rookies will all say that. But a youthful team led kind of in spirit by Trinity Rodman, the way that she approaches the game, which again is a lot of taking it very seriously, but also with a lot of joy, with a little bit of an edge. A funny group, a group that's very happy to be there, a group that has seen a lot of success at a very young age, and there's a reason for that. And again, just talking about the consistency that the Spirit have had this year, just really good coaching, a solid base. And then for Orlando, it really came down to sometimes the most simple story is the true one, MARTA. It came down to winning it for MARTA. You talk about holding court. The way MARTA was speaking to reporters on media day and the way she was speaking to reporters on during the press conferences on Friday, this was her weekend. And as we know, like last year, it was Megan Rapinoe's weekend and it didn't go her way. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to win the game, but you can feel that this is the larger narrative point of what we're all doing there. And I think for MARTA, you saw how well they played against Kansas City the week before. They were confident. They were calm. It was interesting. Orlando also noted a number of times just some of the adversity that they had to get through, even if it wasn't necessarily losing. Like we know about the unbeaten streak, but it's so obvious that the coaching staff for Orlando had done a good job of impressing the lessons of the almost losses, right? Or the things they had to problem solve or maybe problem solve successfully. And I think that a lot of that paid off in the championship game. And I just feel so lucky. I keep talking about all the really lovely things about championship weekend, but it's been a really good showcase for some of the true legends of the game after maybe a theme this year of a lot of retirements, right? From a lot of these names that will be remembered forever. 2021, Kelly O'Hara wins a championship. 2022, Christine Sinclair wins a championship. 2023, you have Pino, you have Krieger. Krieger gets the win, but that was just a showcase of the two of them, though obviously the Pino injury really affected what happened during the game. 2024, all about MARTA. And that was very, very cool. MARTA is a player that I never necessarily even thought I'd get to cover in a championship, whether it's just the circumstances that brought her to the States, brought her to the NWSL, or also just the fact that the Pride haven't been the best team in the NWSL in the past. I just felt very lucky to see that. And it was so obvious that that was going to be the story of the weekend, no matter what. And you could see MARTA open up too. I think that was also very compelling. MARTA is a player that, especially with English speaking media, and I say this like rightfully so, she hasn't always been as open as she is now. I think sometimes you see that comes with age, it comes with comfort level, it comes with kind of who she wanted to be for her teammates in this moment. A lot of times a player will become sort of that lightning rod, that focal point for media before a game because they want to absorb that on behalf of their players. And so she was, she was telling jokes during media day about like the fights on the field, or caught talking about Kansas City and the rivalry there. Or, she called a Kansas City opponent a diva. She wouldn't say who it was, but those little things describing why she wears bold lip during the games. She was incredible. And it was just very lovely to also see that MARTA even before we went into this game. And that story, it kind of writes itself. It's very compelling. 8 years with the ups and downs. Other stars leave. MARTA stays. She wonders why she keeps doing it every year. And then now she's having the dream season to make it all worth it. History is written by the victors. I'm focusing on Orlando a little bit more here probably. But Washington, I think, had its own story that could have been the prevailing one. Again, talking about the consistency of coaching and the youthful excellence and the twists and in terms of their season. But it felt a little bit like this was Orlando's to lose, and just in terms of vibe. Because the game itself, let's get into it. Let's talk about the game. It was cagey. There's not a lot of XG between these teams. Certainly not high XG chances. Orlando gets it done 1-0 with a goal by Barbara Banda. Now I'm going to divert over to the notes that I wrote live at the game. So all of this stuff that I'm about to say, I was kind of taking in real time, because this is a game that is it would have been difficult, I think, to latch onto, because a lot of it was played between the boxes, or in some cases played in penalty areas without definitive shots getting off. The winner wasn't necessarily the team that had the run of play for the most part, though you could see some disjointedness on both sides. So I'm going to go back into the beginning of this game and run through some of these notes. So here's what I said when I was watching the game. So Orlando let Washington have a lot of the ball early. You saw Ali Watt on Orlando's side and Rosamond Kwasi on Washington's side. They were battling 1v1 an incredible amount. There was a lot of 1v1 battles. It was a little bit chippy. It was, you could see Kwasi trying to get into space. You could see her trying to find her teammates. You could see Watt on the other side as sort of a defensive attacker, pushing to avoid any major chances. On Washington's side, you could see how Watt being willing to play both sides of the ball was huge for Orlando in this game. She even talked about it post-game, like she was willing to do anything she needed to do, and she was getting called in to disrupt and then send the ball forward, and she did an incredible job. The Lacey Santos Kawasi connection was real, maybe less effective than last week. They weren't finding each other as much, but they were so dangerous on the ball that you felt like danger could strike at any moment. You had McKenna Morris starting in this game, which is another one of those Washington rookies and a very attacking minded. Starting 11 for Washington, I liked that they were very brave. They did not shy away or try to play more conservatively. They said, we're going to go score, and we're going to win this game. It's a really good offense that Washington has, and that will continue to be true. I think the way that they were set up with Santos and Kawasi, and then you had Rodman and Morris, and then you had Ashley Hatch in the middle, that's a good attack. And every time I was watching them try to find that right pass, because they did have a lot of the momentum in this game, I thought to myself, or you even had the fullbacks getting involved when you have Casey Kruger getting involved, someone like that. You do think to yourself, this is a good attack, and it feels like they're going to find something, right? But then Orlando stayed calm. I guess maybe that's just the biggest thing, right? Sometimes it felt like composure was working against Washington. They were slightly rushed in the attack, or they weren't finding each other, maybe dribbling a little bit too much, or letting the Orlando defense get into the right spot to make a blocked shot. Consistent pressure from the Spirit, but every single time Orlando did get a turnover, they did get the ball back, they'd send it forward to Barbara Banda, and you would say all they need is just one of these to work. And it's not even necessarily like incredibly good passes. The Banda makes her own assists in a way sometimes, and this was definitely true in the actual goal. It's more just seeing kind of where she is and then sending the ball where she can get to. They don't really send it to Banda's feet. They send it to other parts of space, and they go, we know that Barbara Banda is going to beat her player, and she's going to make it into that space, and then she's going to beat her player again to get back to the shot that she wants, and then there's going to be a scoring chance. And it was really interesting to see the Shield winner kind of approach it like that, because that feels very much like an underdog mentality, but it worked. And I think maybe that is the footballing gods kind of smiling down on Orlando. Maybe it is just, Barbara Banda is just that good, because there was no really nuanced ball progression from Orlando in this game. At one point, you did see Marta, who is supposed to be sitting closer to the front line. She comes back to start an attacking sequence around the 27th, 28th minute. I'm like, this is not a good sign for Orlando. They are getting disrupted. They are not seeing the ball. They are defending a lot, and they are not progressing through their midfield. And then immediately, maybe it works, and the ball gets sent over, and it's Banda going the other way, and Orlando has a chance. And that is how this goal happens, right? It feels like it's against the run of play. There is the foul or no foul on the assist by Angelina. I can see both sides on that one. I think Santos, so she is theoretically running for the ball against Lacey Santos. They're trying to hit a 50-50, and then Santos goes down. There's hands to the face on Santos, and then Angelina sends the ball forward. So to me, I really don't like the hands to the face element of that foul. Like, I think that should be a stopped play every single time, hands to the face like that. But I think there are other factors in the moment. It always looks worse if you're watching at home. That's the other thing I'll say, is all of that stuff when you're watching in the game, you do see the ebbs and the flows, and you see the calls, and you see the fans complain and stuff like that. But that moment, I think, played on TV a lot worse than it felt like in the room. And sometimes it's helpful to be in the room, because it's also where the referee is. The reasons why I understand why that call did not get made, you have Santos kind of pull out of the contact, which I feel like this was kind of the theme throughout this game for Washington, which is that if you want it too badly, if you want the whistle too badly, NWSL refs don't always reward that. Now, do I think that is by the book how it should be done? No. Do I think it's kind of consistent? Yeah. So Santos kind of pulls out of the contact. She gets the contact. She goes down. The ref basically, approaches it in sort of a get into the gym sort of mindset. Angelina sends the ball forward, and Barbara Banda is suddenly on the break. Now, that foul did not influence what Barbara Banda did next. That is like my other thing, which is that the actual goal sequence had nothing to do with that foul. Banda gets the ball on the right side. She doesn't really have a great shooting angle. She's got Esme Morgan stepping to her, and she puts Morgan in a blender. There's no angle, but there's also no question of Banda finding the place where she needs to be and getting that ball off. You watch that, and this has been something that comes off, and I write this in my live notes, of just sort of that Temwa Chawinga versus Barbara Banda debate. Temwa Chawinga had the better season than Barbara Banda did this year, and that is why she was MVP. I voted for her for MVP. She had a better season than Barbara Banda did. But you watch Banda and you go, that's the best striker in the world. It's the best striker in the world right now. It's both the certainty that she knows that she doesn't have the angle yet and that she will get it. And I just, maybe some mistakes on Washington's side. They talk about that after after the game, but Banda getting this goal is just not surprising to me. Her being the one who made the difference is not surprising to me. The fact it was on a 1v1 opportunity is not surprising to me. And maybe it is sometimes just as simple as that. And you have the best striker in the world, and that's how you win games. And that's kind of been the story of the Pride a lot this season, right? Through adversity. So now it's Washington's turn to get an equalizer, right? That's the whole rest of the game. The whole rest of the game is just, can Washington get the equalizer? Orlando just didn't have a lot going forward for the rest of the game. They were defending a lot. Similar outlet idea where they were just trying to find Banda and see what could happen and see what would work. So then the attention flips back to Washington, because now Washington is the team with the mandate to get a goal. They are seeing more of the ball. They're getting more chances. They finished this game with 26 shots. So what happened? Why didn't Washington get that equalizer or pour ahead? A number of things, right? One being that Trinity Rodman is hurt. She played this whole game and she is injured. We talked about this in the preview. It's true. She talked about it after the game. Emma Hayes talked about it when she talked about why she didn't call her up to the U.S. Women's National Team window after this game. Her back hurts. Her back is hurting her. And when your back feels that way, you can't sprint. You can't jog. You can't take contact. Your legs are not moving the way they want you to move. And also, your brain doesn't work as well when you're in pain like that. After the game, Rodman said in the mix zone, this is her quote. She says, "It's no secret that I was fighting through a back issue pretty much since I got back from the Olympics." And then she went on to say, that's not an excuse, but I wasn't the trend that I wanted to be today. And that was also true. She said she could have pulled herself out of the game. We were really wondering at halftime if that was going to be the case. She walked off very gingerly. It was clear that her back was really bothering her. The question in the press box was, does someone else come in the second half? The answer is no. Jonah Heraldez after the game was very clear that he felt like having Rodman out there was their best chance to win the game. I completely respect that, but that impacted things. Washington got a smattering of shots, right? They got a lot of sort of half chances. That's why you see 26 shots, only 5 shots on goal. Anna Morehouse played very, very well. We all kind of noted that she does have a propensity for mistakes, and she made none in this game. They had the goalkeeper. Like, that's the whole thing. Like, Orlando, very simple. They have the goalkeeper. They have the striker. They win the game. They forced Washington to pass with more precision than Washington was able to. You saw a lot of dribbling. You saw Emily Sams being very massive in terms of her spatial awareness and grabbing the ball and turning the ball the other way. You saw Kylie Strum, her center back partner, doing a lot of block shots. They're angling. They stayed, again, very calm, because it's hard to kind of overemphasize how often Washington was entering Orlando's penalty area. It was wave after wave after wave. I think it was kind of less impressive from Orlando when we talk about the whole part of this game, where I go, you guys are the shield winners, and it feels like so much of this game was you absorbing energy and sort of sending it back, which I don't know, maybe that's how you win knockout soccer. But Washington increasingly spends more and more time in Orlando's penalty area. You see Orlando kind of staying very calm, getting those when I say sort of the half chances, that's sort of what I mean. It seemed like there was one clear chance. There was a header by Kouassi, I believe. Morehouse saves it. That was the definitive chance for Washington this entire game, despite the sort of overall offense that they created. They just could not get that breakthrough. Again, they sort of forced the ref into becoming a big part of the game, and the ref did not make those decisions on their behalf. You saw a lot of dribbling in the box, and then players would go down on contact, and it was very late in the game. And you say, is that a penalty? Is the ref letting the moment get to them too much rather than kind of playing or reffing what they're seeing on the field? I think also, like I said, I think when you force a ref into those 50-50 calls in the NWSL, more often than not, they do not make those calls, so they feel like you went down a little bit too easy, or they feel like you were not actually looking for a shot. You were just kind of looking for some dribble contact. The Washington has actually, I think, had some trouble throughout this playoffs, focusing on the ref a little too much. I think this was true against Bay FC, maybe less true against Gotham. But I think when you force these NWSL refs, I'm not saying it's right, but when you force NWSL refs into these 50-50 calls, they're not always going to go your way. And so the game ends. The game ends. Orlando wins 1-0. Orlando pulls the double. They're shield winners and championship winners. Marta is going to, not this year, I don't think. There's no indications that she's slowing down, but at some point she's going to ride off into the sunset, both a shield and a championship winner. Orlando defense mighty. Barbara Banda effervescent in her moment of brilliance, her moment of truth. And for Washington, I think they were just kicking themselves after this game. The vibe that you got in mixed zone and the pressers was, yes, they're devastated. They lost a championship, but they weren't thinking about that in that moment immediately after final whistle. They were thinking about how they lost a game where they were kind of the better team. I think they would have been this frustrated if it had been the fourth regular season game of the year versus the championship game. They felt like they had the better of the chances. They felt like the officiating wasn't necessarily in their favor. and they made mistakes that they don't usually make. So Esma Morgan and Aubrey Kingsbury were the two players who came out and spoke in the press conference. Always appreciative of their time. Difficult to do after a tough loss, but that's again how you see how strong the locker room and the leadership is in the Spirit, in the Spirit's veteran core. Morgan talks about the goal, right, where she kind of gets spun. She says, what I find most frustrating, like replaying in my head, is that we dealt with Barbara Banda so well throughout most of the 90 minutes, barring just the goal. And I'm kicking myself for it. So she was just, she was kind of underlining that fact that she did so, like they did handle Banda. They did handle the Orlando attack. There was not a lot going on there. But then that one moment, you just have that moment of truth, and she got spun. She said that she was a little bit of two minds when she was facing Banda in that moment. She was worried actually about giving up a penalty. She says there's times where she goes down softly in the box. So I was kind of reluctant to get too tight in case there was a dive involved, anything like that. And then she says, I'm frustrated that I had that weighing on my mind. And you saw Kingsbury. She says the same thing. She says that goal, if I just take 2 steps and get low, that's a blocked shot. And so they're just replaying those moments. You had Rodman talking about, the chances that they were creating and the fact that they couldn't get that one chance to land or couldn't find the angle or weren't patient enough or didn't move the ball with enough. Like I think were just frustrated because they genuinely felt like that was a really close game between two really good teams. And it wasn't that they couldn't pull the upset off. It was just that they made those tiny mistakes and Orlando did not. And that's ball games sometimes. And that's just kind of how it goes. So Orlando pulls off one of the best NWSL seasons of all time. They turn things around. They change the game for themselves and they remain calm. I mentioned this before, but Emily Sams talks about learning through the difficult moments, even if when we watch it, we go, oh, they won or, oh, they didn't lose. But they say, no, we went down a player in Kansas City. She talked about that, about how you do sometimes have to handle wave after wave of pressure. And the fact that you succeeded at but doing it in the past only helps you in the present when you have to do it in a championship game. Anything can happen in the NWSL. It's an incredible success story for the Orlando Pride that we'll be talking about for a long time. I hope it gives, encouragement to any fan of any NWSL team that's struggling for results. It can happen. Hire the right people, make the right signings, get a leadership structure that makes sense, communicate well with your players and your coaching staff, and you can do this too. So another wonderful NWSL season culminating in a decent game, a fine game on a fabulous weekend. You see the narrative win out. Marta, she gets to, she's on TV and she says, I effing waited 8 years for this moment. And it's true. It's just a really nice encapsulation of what can happen in the NWSL, the parity that we hope continues, and just a huge congratulations to Orlando Pride, because you have to win these games too to be a champion. And I don't think there's anyone who understood that better than them. And so congratulations to Marta, congratulations to the Pride, to Barbara Banda, who was so proud of herself after the game. It was really cool to see a young player like that, so happy that she is in the NWSL. And then we go again, right? We go again next year, and maybe we'll see another surprising success story. Check out any of the teams that didn't make playoffs this year, because based on past results, maybe they're a championship in the waiting. All right, and real quick before we go, I'm going to shout this out maybe as a preview, because we are going to dive into college basketball a little bit more in the upcoming weeks. But I did want to note the 2 big college basketball games that happened this weekend. I caught portions of them. I recorded them. I'm going to dig into them a little bit more when I have a second to breathe. But it is incredibly notable, right, that number 1 South Carolina lost for the first time since the 2023 Final Four. This weekend, they lose to number 5 UCLA. They snap a 43-game winning streak. They didn't look great. There was a little bit of an edge to that one too, man. You talk about UCLA, that crowd was shouting overrated at the end of this game, and the players were celebrating a lot. I'm really interested to see how South Carolina bounced back from that adversity. USC also suffered their first loss over the weekend. They lose to number 6 Notre Dame. Also not incredibly close. Notre Dame did really very consistently outplay USC in that game. Both South Carolina and USC really struggled to play through their posts. They struggled with the inside-outside game. We're seeing transfers trying to get comfortable. We're seeing young players trying to step up. Just a lot of intrigue here at the beginning of the college basketball season. So I would have been remiss if I didn't mention it. And then the final thing is the one other big piece of news coming out of NWSL weekend is that there are 3 teams left for expansion. The 16th NWSL team will go between Cincinnati, Cleveland, and Denver. So put in, I guess, who you would like to see in the NWSL in the chat, in the comments, and we'll discuss all of that more next week. We are going to be taking this Thursday off for the holiday in the US. We will see you all next week. And just everyone, thank you for listening.